Gannon Stauch. For those of you who do not recall, Gannon Stauch went missing on January 27th from his home in Colorado Springs. He was last seen with his stepmother, Letitia Stauch. Now, she stated that he went off to be with a friend. That was the last that she had seen of him. Letitia Stauch was arrested upon her return to her home state of South Carolina, and on her return trip, being extradited via the El Paso County Sheriff's Department, she attempted to slip out of her handcuffs, or did slip out of her handcuffs would probably be more accurate to say, and assaulted a deputy sheriff. Certainly not a good move on her part, certainly shows a little consciousness of guilt on her part as well. If you were innocent, you would simply say, fine, let's get back to court as quickly as possible and make this happen. Letitia Stauch appeared in court late last week, and formal charges were filed. When Letitia Stauch was charged of her charges late last week, there was a charge of first-degree murder and some tampering. Now, as of today, and the news that has come forth today, and the news, unfortunately, is that the El Paso County Sheriff's Department is reporting that they have found the remains of Gannon Stauch. Now, it's purported that the remains were found in Florida, specifically in Santa Rosa County down there, and apparently the sheriff received a call from the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office in Pace, Florida, regarding a deceased boy. An autopsy was performed, and the remains were tentatively identified as Gannon Stauch. And following the discovery in Florida, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office has filed additional charges against Letitia Stauch. First, there's the first-degree murder, victim under 12, by a person in position of trust. That is a Class 1 felony that carries life without the possibility of parole. There's a charge of murder in the first degree after deliberation, which is also a Class 1 felony here in the state of Colorado, which carries life without parole. There's a charge of child abuse resulting in death, which is a Class 2 felony, which carries 16 to 48 years in prison, plus a 5-year mandatory period of parole upon her release. And that would be a period of supervision in addition to and subsequent to any Department of Correction sentence if she were ever to be released. Now, there are also 8 counts of crimes of violence that allege a use of a firearm, a blunt instrument, a knife, or other sharp object for causing the death of Gannon Stauch. Now, the charges are not specific as to what the deadly weapon was used, but they're clearly alleging that a deadly weapon was used. So we need to wait for the affidavit to be released before we try to speculate on that. A deadly weapon in Colorado can include anything. I've seen it as a pillow, a shoe, a foot, your hands. It can be anything, not just what is outlined specifically in the statute. Now, additionally, there is a tampering with a deceased body count, which is a Class 3 felony, which carries 4 to 12 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections, as well as tampering with physical evidence, which is a Class 6 felony, which carries 12 to 18 months in the Colorado Department of Corrections. Now, Ms. Stauch is obviously given the presumption of innocence, and what remains to be seen, and we need to wait to reserve judgment until we get more information, is to how the police in Florida came across this body. Was this a body of a child that was discovered by somebody walking by, or a hunter, or somebody out running, or was somebody leading the police to the body that's associated with this case in some way, perhaps a cooperating witness, or was there a situation where perhaps Ms. Stauch led the police to the location in an attempt to gain some, perhaps some mitigation to the police? Now, I've seen this handled in a particular case that I was involved with. I had a mother that was charged with a child abuse resulting in death. They could not find the body of the child, and the boyfriend was ultimately charged. And the district attorney was threatening the death penalty if they found the body and that the boyfriend did not cooperate. Ultimately, in that particular case, to take death off the table, the boyfriend led them to the location of the body in the woods to do that. So Colorado has no death penalty anymore. So my belief is that Letitia Stauch would have fallen under that time period before the Colorado legislature and the governor signed the repeal of the death penalty. So that could have been something that was on the table. Now, I'm not saying that that's what took place. I'm just telling you I've seen that in experience in cases that I have handled. And although whether you agree or disagree with the death penalty, whether it was used, there's lots of statistics to show that it wasn't used fairly. It was a huge bargaining tool for the district attorneys, and it's the kind of thing that completely reduced the power of the district attorney to bargain with people in serious cases, particularly if there's someone like locate the body and help us locate the body and we'll take the death penalty off the table. This is going to be interesting. We know that there have been at least 100 search warrants that have been drafted, reviewed by a judge, and signed. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they pieced this case together, the detectives. It's probably really good police work. And it could be, videos from stores, searches of houses, residents, phone records. It's going to be huge. Now, the El Paso County Sheriff's Department is asking people if they have any recollection or video or film or have any personal knowledge of Miss Letitia Stauch being in Pace, Florida anytime after Gannon Stauch's disappearance and her arrest in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now, from a defense perspective, what do we know? Could this help the defense attorneys for Miss Stauch? Absolutely. Depending on the ability of the police to be able to explain how that body got there and how do they place Miss Letitia Stauch, putting it there, or was there somebody else? It truly remains. Now remember, Letitia Stauch said, and the police originally treated this case as a runaway. And whether it was a runaway or an abduction, I'm sure, unless the evidence is completely contrary to that, the defense is going to be exploring and trying to show that that was in fact the case. Now, Ms. Stauch is not due back in court until April 14th, which is obviously a short time away. However, like most court cases here in Colorado, everything is being continued into June unless there are speedy trial issues. And that does not a case yet because speedy trial has not started in Miss Letitia Stauch's case. That doesn't start until she gets to arraignment. They were set for a status on April 14th to determine how much time they're going to need to review the discovery and be prepared to proceed to a preliminary hearing. With the courts basically being shut down, it's going to be very unlikely that this case is in any kind of a fast track, and I would not expect anything of any substance probably until June of this year. We will continue to follow the case and monitor the pleadings in this case as well and bring it to you as things develop. Sad case, but if it is in fact Gannon Stauch's body based upon the preliminary identification, at least the family has peace of mind and they can in fact provide a proper burial for their son. Now, obviously, the big case out there that I'd like to discuss is that of Gannon Stauch. Obviously, he's the young man from El Paso County, which is down in Colorado Springs, here in Colorado. His stepmother, Letitia Stauch, has been charged with his death, and she appeared in court late last week. And then it was reported yesterday that the remains of young Gannon were in fact discovered in Florida a couple of days ago, and they were trying to do some preliminary identifications as it relates to the body and notifying the family, etc. So obviously, all our thoughts go out to the family. I could not imagine losing a child. That's one of the worst things that any parent could possibly ever have to deal with, and probably questioning and second-guessing themselves as to what they should have done. And it's obviously not their fault, but it's clearly, a tragic situation all around. So I'd like to talk about that. And then another thing, and this is this is crime talk related, because I think a crime has been committed, and that is these 4 congressmen and women who were basically trading on insider information and dumping a bunch of stock. And I just want to touch on this, and obviously we'll talk about Gannon Stauch as well as any other cases that people want to talk about. But I think this is worth mentioning because these politicians want us to trust them, and everything that they do basically says we can't trust them. And then when we find out that they're trading on information that we don't have access to, but they're dumping their stock portfolios so that they don't lose money like the rest of us. And I don't know about you, but I looked at my stocks and they're about 50% less than they were a couple of weeks ago. And if I had been told information, maybe I would have acted upon it. But these senators who acted upon it and saved themselves millions of dollars in losses, in my opinion, have violated what is referred to as the Stock Act, and it stopped trading on congressional knowledge. Basically, senators and congressmen cannot profit or prevent losing money based upon information they learn in their official capacity. I mean, this is what we call public service. And, I think that these people should work for literally $1 a year. We want successful people in office because they've proven themselves that they can do something. And successful people does not mean, I got elected to office. I mean, let's face it, both of these parties, the Republican and Democrat parties, if they were not writing the rules for themselves, they would be classified as, organized crime, criminal organizations. And they have this seniority system of the insiders pick who's going to be the next person in line to take the job. So I don't see that as being successful, that you got elected to that. I want people that have been successful in business in their private life, and then they go and they do public service, and they work for $1 a year because they're not there for the money. They're not there to profit. And so when these senators get this inside information and do that, I think it's completely a betrayal, not only to the country, to their constituents, but everyone else that is out there. And so I want to talk about that as well. So anyway, let's talk about the Gannon Stauch case, and let's take comments, take questions from people here as well. Looks, I already got Alicia. Good evening from Ireland. I hope you all are doing well. Hopefully, everyone out there that is self-quarantining or sheltering in place because basically they're told they have to, are doing okay. Hopefully we can help you get through that process as well. So let's talk about, like I said, we'll kind of reset here because we have some more people that have shown up on our live podcast here on Facebook. And as I stated, this will be recorded and uploaded back on YouTube. I know a lot of people don't like Facebook. I get it. And like I said, I prefer YouTube to actually do these as well. However, like I said, YouTube in their arbitrary and capricious manner has taken our ability to go live for a little while longer, and it's rather frustrating because somebody can say, "Oh, you used a video," and we can't respond to it, and they just simply say you can't do something. Like I said, if anybody there that works at YouTube would like to, reach out to us, we'd appreciate it because we can't get any response from anybody, and it's just absolutely frustrating. So, like America dealing with this coronavirus and the world, we're not going to just sit back and take it. We're going to find another way to make it work. That's what makes us great. That's what makes the world great, is we solve problems. We just don't say, "Oh, YouTube won't let us go live," or YouTube won't let us go live, so we just can't do anything. Oh yeah, there's always a solution to the problem, and we are trying to find that solution until they would like to let us back on the air, so to speak. So let's, like I said, kind of reset there. So the Gannon Stauch case. Obviously, this is the young man. He was reported missing from Colorado Springs. Let's go through the timeline. So just kind of as a reset, Letitia Stauch is the stepmother of Gannon Stauch, and she has been charged now with first-degree murder, child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased body, tampering with physical evidence, and then several crimes of violence charges, basically saying that a deadly weapon of some type was used to cause the death of Gannon Stauch. Now, this case, goes back, obviously, to January. January 27th, Gannon Stauch's stepmom, Letitia, reports Gannon missing. And Letitia reportedly told investigators that Gannon was last seen in the afternoon as he left to go to a friend's house. And the El Paso County Sheriff's Department that was investigating this case originally classified or labeled Gannon as a runaway child. Now, early on, Letitia Stauch, the stepmother, was considered a prime suspect, and that makes sense. In most of these cases, the last person that saw them is the individual that may have the most information. It just kind of makes sense. Now, as you recall, down in Houston, why can't I? Heidi Broussard case of the missing child. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon to say that the husband was responsible. He was the last one to see them. And it turned out not to be the case at all. So we have to kind of sit back. In this case, obviously with Gannon Stauch, it's a little more interesting because of the location of the body being found, and I think it's interesting. But we'll talk about that as well. So 3 days later, on January 30th of 2020, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office decided to upgrade the investigation to a missing and endangered child case. And on January 31st, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office publicly asked for volunteers to register with the incident command team to coordinate search areas. And obviously, they started beginning search of the surrounding areas. February 1st, children in Gannon Larson Ranch neighborhood came together and had like a little prayer vigil for him, and obviously hoping for his safe return. On February 2nd, a neighbor of the Stauchs, Roderick Drayton, releases surveillance video. Boy, I can't talk this morning. Roderick Drayton releases surveillance video which reportedly shows Gannon's stepmom, Letitia, leaving with Gannon and then returning home without him. This video contradicts the initial statements that Letitia reportedly made to investigators, obviously. We've said this before, and I'll say it again. In a criminal investigation, the first story is never the truth, all right? If you've ever had small children and, they have crumbs around their face, and you say, "Did you take a cookie from the cookie jar?" They say, "No, I didn't." "Okay, are you sure? Because I see some crumbs around your face in the cookie jar." You know, it looks like it took some cookies from the cookie jar. And then maybe the truth comes out that, you know, the dog made him eat it or something along those lines. But the first story given to the police is never the truth, at least from the suspects sometimes, most of the time, because they don't know what they should tell or not tell. February 3rd, investigators from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office and crime lab technicians were spotted searching for evidence in the Stauch's family home. Now, obviously, when they send in these crime scene investigation teams, they're looking for anything of evidentiary value. They probably don't know what they're looking for. Obviously, they're looking for, is there any weapons? Are there any blood stains? Anything that would indicate possibly some type of a struggle or a fight or anything kind of just out of the ordinary. When you talk to crime scene investigators, sometimes it's quite obvious. You know, they go in and there's a body and they look for it and there's a handgun next to the person. They know where they need to start looking. But sometimes you don't know what you're looking for, and particularly when a suspect resides there, or, you know, the person that they're searching, their home is the suspect, you don't know what you're looking for. And literally they have to go through every little nook and cranny to looking for things of evidentiary value. And whether there's a search warrant, then there's issues of, do they exceed the scope of the search warrant, or if there was a consent to search, was there a valid consent to search the house? These are all kinds of issues that, you know, the defense will have to deal with later, and obviously the prosecution has to deal with early on. So February 28th, let me jump back there. So February 3rd, they searched the home of the Stauchs. February 5th, Gannon's father and biological mother released an emotional video plea for information related to Gannon's disappearance. This video plea was shared by local news outlets as well as the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. On February 28th, so 23 days later, some time had gone by. Obviously, the police had been working diligently. As we know, there's some 100 search warrants that were authored, reviewed, signed by a judge, and then executed. But February 28th, court records show investigators sought an arrest warrant for Letitia Stauch, Gannon's stepmom. March 2nd, the Sheriff's Department announced the arrest of Letitia Stauch. March 5th, she arrived in the El Paso County Jail and later that day appeared before her judge. The attorney waived the advisement until the first appearance. That date has now been set for April 14th. And as you may also recall, there was a little incident with Letitia Stauch on the way back from South Carolina where she slithered out of her handcuffs and literally physically attacked one of the El Paso County Sheriff deputies traveling with her. Obviously, you know, we don't know exactly yet, but one would assume that she was attempting to escape. That's what they refer to as consciousness of guilt. And you can actually get an instruction. The prosecution can get an instruction which is referred to as the consciousness of guilt. It's called the flight instruction. And then if somebody is basically at a scene and they flee and they're caught somewhere later, you can try to use that as consciousness of guilt, because why would an innocent person run away is basically the basis for that particular instruction. Well, it could also be given in this particular case to show consciousness of guilt, because why would you try to escape if you knew you've done nothing wrong and you're confident that the legal system was going to unravel this big mistake that has apparently taken place? So that's where ultimately we stand. And then yesterday, the police announced that they'd found Gannon Stauch's body in Florida. And the police are actually asking for information, if anyone has any information, as to whether they saw or believe they could show that Miss Stauch was in the area where the body was found. Now, that seems like an unusual request at this point, given the fact that there's over 100 search warrants. I will bet you $1 that her phone, all the cell phone tower data has been applied for, requested, and retrieved. And it's interesting that they're asking for somebody to put her there if her phone is not showing that she was in that area. We'll have to wait and see. Now, obviously, she's the last person there. The question is, since the affidavits haven't been released, is what information do the police have that have led to the arrest of Letitia Stauch? We don't know exactly what it was, other than she's the last person with them. She says she's a runaway, that Gannon was a runaway. To look at it from the defense perspective, you think they're going to try to be able to show that she, in fact, was a runaway. Now, I've read some information that the father said the only thing really that he noticed is missing from the house was a suitcase. So the suitcase that was recovered, that apparently young Gannon was found in, obviously, was that from his house or was it another suitcase? Those are everyone's going to be looking for things to tie them to Letitia Stauch. Did she have help? How would she have got down to this part of Florida? Apparently, it's about a 21-hour drive from Colorado to Florida in this particular location where the body was found. Where was she? She kind of dropped off radar, at least here, for a while, and I don't know where she went. I'm sure the police know exactly where she went. If she was the prime suspect, I'm sure that they were monitoring her. For all we know, there could have been a GPS unit that a warrant was applied for and put on her car. Who knows? There could have been communications between her and her now husband, who is now filed for divorce, where she made admissions. Those are all admissible as it relates against her in court if anything like that was mentioned. Letitia Stauch, the stepmother, stated that she last saw Gannon when he was on his way to go see some friends. That never materialized, and in fact, a neighbor's Ring doorbell video surveillance camera showed that Letitia Stauch, was leaving with Gannon, and when they returned, he was not in the vehicle with her. Ultimately, Letitia Stauch goes to South Carolina, her home state, and specifically in Myrtle Beach. She is ultimately arrested on charges of first-degree murder. Additional charges were added, included child abuse resulting in death, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, as well as violent crime sentencing enhancer counts, alleging that a deadly weapon was used in the death of young Gannon. Now, Letitia Stauch, while being extradited back to the state of Colorado, slithered out of her handcuffs, assaulted a deputy sheriff from El Paso County that was transporting her, and she had to spend an extra night in Kansas while they sorted that whole situation out. No new charges from that incident as of yet. Frankly, that's the least of Letitia Stauch's concerns. Well, Letitia Stauch appeared in court a little over a week ago. Her attorneys waived her 35-day rule, which was to have a preliminary hearing within 35 days. There's apparently a large amount of discovery, police reports, any investigation. We know that there's at least 100 search warrants that were authored, reviewed by a DA, submitted to a judge and approved, and then executed by various law enforcement agencies, both here in Colorado, Florida, and South Carolina. So there's going to be a huge, voluminous discovery in this particular case. The attorneys probably needed that time, and it's not like Miss Letitia Stauch is going anywhere because she's on a no-bond hold. At that preliminary hearing, they will also hold a proof evident presumption great hearing to decide whether she is entitled to or should get a bond. We found out just this past week that Gannon's body was found in Pace, Florida, and the police are still conducting their investigation because apparently, at least what we're finding out through the media reports, is that they have no idea and are having apparently some difficulty placing Letitia Stauch in Florida, some 1,400 miles away. So it's going to be interesting when the affidavit for arrest warrant is unsealed to see how they establish probable cause, other than they believe that Letitia Stauch was the last person with Gannon. They still have to be able to explain how This young boy's remains wound up in Florida, some 1,400 miles away, and for lack of a better term, they didn't follow her, they being the police in this particular case. Well, some preliminary autopsy work was done. They made a preliminary identification as to Gannon Stauch, and there's also reports that the body had evidence of blunt force wounds, i.e. hitting something with a hard object, as well as potential stab wounds and even possibly a gunshot. Now, that's preliminary. We'll have to see exactly what the autopsy does in fact show. Gannon Stauch's father, Al, made a statement, and he's been very shy. He admits that he's a very shy person, but he wanted to thank everybody for their thoughts, prayers, and concerns, as well as everyone respecting his privacy. We will see how this case develops. Obviously, like all courts here in Colorado, things are going to be delayed. I can tell you from personal experience right now, a lot of cases are being continued now until the first part of June. So basically, the courts are being put on hold specifically for cleaning. I can tell you the courthouse that I was in last Friday is closed today because a public defender had contacted the coronavirus. The chief judge shut the entire building down for today as well as for tomorrow for complete sanitization, and they've shut the courthouse down for the rest of the week. But some courts may be having a virtual courtroom where people call in by phone. It is a complete chaos, for lack of a better term, because these proceedings need to take place, but obviously there's a public health risk, and at some point, somebody's going to have to decide what is of greater concern, the public health risk or assuring that a criminal defendant constitutional rights are not violated. The Constitution does not get suspended just because there is a national health crisis. So we shall see. Courts are crazy everywhere, not just in Colorado Springs, where the case is being heard. Everywhere around the state, the courtrooms, there's no clear directive from our Supreme Court saying shut it down or keep it going, but our some 22 judicial districts are doing their own thing, and then it's literally each courtroom is doing its own thing, and it literally changes by the hour. We'll have to see if Letitia Stauch's April 14th hearing for additional charges is postponed as well. We will keep you updated. Today's topic, though, is what can we learn from the witness list in the Letitia Stauch case? Every time a complaint and information is filed in a case, the witness list used to have to be automatically attached to the complaint and information, right? Because that just is fair that the defense gets to see who the witnesses are against the defendant. Well, they changed that rule. They don't really do it at the same time anymore, but they still do it. Everyone on the witness list is someone that has done something in the case. They have to be listed by their name, their contact information, and if they're with a particular organization, they need to be listed. Now, I'm not going to go through and list everybody's identity as it relates in the witness list because, frankly, there are a lot of people out there that'll just get silly with it. But I can tell you, there's a 23-page witness list in this case, and it's only going to get longer, all right? Because this is the witness list because they haven't supplemented the witness list just yet with the amendment of charges and the finding of the body of young Gannon down in Florida. But I can tell you the first 2 pages of witnesses, and there's 14 witnesses per page, include agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are located here in Colorado. Page 3, once again, nothing but federal agents. The 4th page, more federal agents as well as Colorado Springs Police Department and El Paso County Sheriff's Department. Now, you have to remember, everyone who basically works on a case gets put on the witness list. If you write a statement, you're on a witness list. If you are an officer who puts up crime scene tape and writes a report that says, I appeared at this location, I put up tape and I sat in my car until I was relieved, those witnesses all get put on the witness list. But what does that mean? It means for the defense, you got to obviously read the discovery and see what they have to say. Then you have to go back and see, well, what did they not put in their report? Then you have to send an investigator out and go interview these people again. Now, the police won't talk with defense investigators, and the lay witnesses in the case do not have to speak with defense investigators. Now, the prosecution can't tell the defense witnesses to not speak with the defense investigators, but they can say it's your choice and you don't have to. And, why would you want to help anybody who's helping the defense? And so they make up their own mind that they are not going to speak with the defense investigators. Then we have more El Paso County sheriffs, more individuals from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But what gets interesting here is that then we start getting names from people from the FBI from Fayetteville, North Carolina, Amarillo, Texas, Abilene, Texas, Frisco, Texas, Shreveport, Louisiana, Monroe, Louisiana, Jackson, Mississippi, Jacksonville, Florida, more FBI agents, Dalton, Georgia, Myrtle Beach, Jacksonville, Florida, Everett, Washington, another Myrtle Beach. Many FBI agents from Myrtle Beach. There's even one from Washington, D.C. As we go on, once again, Myrtle Beach Police Departments, because that's where Letitia Stauch was arrested. That makes sense. We have people from the what they call SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, probably people that were helping with possibly forensics. Once again, more Colorado Springs police officers. Capital One Bank, probably people were obtaining financial records. Nintendo Product Support Specialists. Big Wave Car Wash. Could that be because they found things where people logged on? For example, Nintendo, Big Wave Car Wash. Did somebody get their car washed, and were they there a particular time? Were they there with somebody in particular? Avis Car Rental out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. Waste Management Transfer. So this gives you an idea of where the police were conducting their investigation. Kohl's down in Colorado Springs. Probably people looking for videotape, surveillance tape in that area. Looking at receipts. Once again, Petco, probably looking for video, where video was obtained. They have to list all those individuals. Now, there's lots of lay witnesses here that go on for several pages. I'll only tell you the ones relating to Avis Security Rentals, Ring Law Enforcement Specialists, obviously Ring doorbell people. And once again, apparently I made another mistake yesterday. I said Ring when it was a surveillance camera. Sorry, but Ring, that's probably where I read it, Ring Surveillance. Volkswagen dealership in Colorado Springs, JP Morgan Chase, Phillips 66, Come and Go, Conoco, Phillips 66. Perhaps people buying gas, people traveling. As you can see, those agents from the federal agents, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama. Possibly somebody making their way to Florida, perhaps? We'll have to wait and see. So although we don't have the witness statements just yet, it gives us a little bit of idea of how the police were conducting their investigation. Obviously, the FBI, and you can see or hear that they have agents literally just about in every major city, every jurisdiction, and they simply pick up the phone and they ask an agent to help them in an investigation, and they do it. And you've heard of the long arm of the law. That's exactly what they mean, and they're usually a couple of steps ahead of you, maybe a few behind you, but they always catch up. You have to appreciate what they can do in the short amount of time that they actually did it. I know it's never soon enough when you have a missing child, but these police officers were probably working literally nonstop with agents all over the country to make this case. We'll see if they have it. Now, next on the docket, I also want to talk about the release of the affidavit for the arrest of Letitia Stauch. Now, at the preliminary initial advisement that took place, we all learned at that particular time that some 100 search warrants were conducted in this particular case. And that could be search warrants for going onto a property, searching a vehicle, obtaining phone records, GPS, you name it. Lots and lots of work being done. And those attorneys are going to have a lot of work ahead of them as far as going through, because I have to go through all of those search warrants to see if they're valid. Okay, just because a judge signs them doesn't make them absolutely bulletproof, so to speak. You have to be able to show for a defense, for a successful challenge, basically, that there were errors or omissions in that affidavit, that had those errors been corrected or those omissions put in information that would be relevant, that there would not be probable cause. And if there was not probable cause for that search warrant to issue, then that evidence was obtained illegally. So there's going to be lots of challenges to those warrants if they obviously have a good faith basis for doing that. But we also learned that the district attorney did not object to the affidavit for arrest warrant being released. Now, the affidavit for the arrest warrant is simply that. That is what the police put into a document, took it to a judge, and said, we believe that a crime has been committed and that Letitia Stauch had something to do with it. And these are all the things that we did in our investigation, not everything, but a summary. And we believe that probable cause exists. So please sign this affidavit. Prosecution didn't object to it. The defense did. Local media as well as national media have filed motions in this particular case asking that the affidavit be released, that the public, the First Amendment, the press has a right to know, and the right of the defendant to have this information hid from the public is not outweighing the public's right to know under the First Amendment. So you see why I love criminal law is it's constitutional law all the time, and these issues come up. You have a defendant who has a right to a fair trial, right to investigate, but you also have the public's right to know what the hell is going on in their court systems, right? We have public trials here. And as I think if we learned anything, regardless of how much publicity a trial gets, you will be able to find 12 jurors, plus maybe a couple of alternates, that can be fair and impartial to hear the case. So let the information out, okay? Now, I get the defense attorneys. They don't want the information out there. I've been there. I've filed these objections saying there's no need for it. It's going to prejudice my client. I've always had a judge release the affidavit. It's just the way it is. It's the way our system works. We're an open society. The court dockets should be open to the public. It's just the way our system works, ladies and gentlemen. And I get the defense making the argument that it's going to prejudice them because of pretrial publicity. It's not going to allow us for a fair investigation down the road. Well, I get it. They're making the argument. How is it going to prejudice them? What? The people aren't going to talk with you? Most of the people on the witness list are police officers and agents. And the first time you're going to get to speak with them is either at a motions hearing or at trial. And more than likely, they have not a whole lot to say because they weren't there when the alleged crime took place in the first place. All right? That's kind of the dirty little secret. Everybody always puts this huge weight on officers showing up in court and testifying. But if you've ever been a witness in a case or you've watched a case, what do the officers say? Well, I responded, and this is what I saw. They don't get to say what other people said, right? They can just testify as to what they observed. So it's not going to affect the defense investigation. The lay witnesses will speak to them or they won't. The police officers won't. That's just the way it is. They don't talk to the defense. So hopefully the judge will release it prior to the next court date. As we talked about yesterday, it'll probably be June sometime, giving all the continuances that are taking place because of the COVID or the coronavirus or whatever virus you want to call it. But it's making a complete mess of the court systems because it's just continuing everything out farther and farther. So hope that was useful and explained something. We're going to follow that because there's lots of interesting legal issues both on the criminal side as well as the constitutional side, which frankly, criminal law is constitutional law. That's what it is. We deal with search and seizure all the time. Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth Amendments, free speech. We deal with it all the time. Next on the docket, Al Stauch. That is the father of Gannon Stauch and soon-to-be ex-husband of Letitia Stauch. The filings in this particular case for the divorce, I mean, they're public record. It's not that difficult to find. But what is interesting is the fact that when these documents were filed, Letitia Stauch was still in South Carolina and hadn't been brought back just yet. But the pleadings also state that where the section that states where the defendant would be residing, Al Stauch, through his attorney, states that Letitia Stauch is in South Carolina awaiting extradition for the murder of petitioner's son, Gannon Stauch. So just kind of a little bit of a jab the attorneys put in there. They could have just said currently in North Carolina and said nothing about the pending charges at all. But obviously, sometimes it's worth taking those little jabs every now and then as an attorney, even though you can still do it and still be professional. Now, the other thing is that the neighbor who turned over the security camera footage, and there's some question whether it's security camera footage or Ring doorbell services, because let's face it, just about everybody has these types of cameras on your doorsteps these days. You can drive down any block and see them. So the neighbor's security camera really kind of gave the big lead because it showed that Letitia Stauch was not being truthful to the police because she originally stated that she believed that Gannon was off with a friend. Turns out there's video of her leaving with him, returning hours later without him. So that is there. The neighbors have stated that they have turned over all of the video to local authorities as well as the FBI. So there's going to be a lot of video evidence in this particular case, is my estimation based upon these type of cases these days. More and more, the video discovery that you receive in discovery for a criminal case far exceeds the paper discovery, which obviously was not the case many, many years ago. You spend more time watching video, sometimes of nothing, but sometimes nothing can be something of evidentiary value. So those attorneys are going to have a lot to review, no doubt.